In 326 BCE, a formidable European army invaded India. Led by Alexander of Macedon, it comprised battle-hardened Macedonian soldiers, Greek cavalry, Balkan fighters, and Persians allies. The total number of fighting men numbered more than 41,000. Their most memorable clash was at the Battle of Hydaspes, Jhelum River against the army of Porus, the ruler of the Paurava kingdom of western Punjab. Alexander's troubles began as soon as he crossed the Indian border. He first faced resistance in the Kunnar, Swat, Buner and Peshawar valleys where the Ashwaina and Ashwakaina stopped his advance. Although small by Indian standards, they did not submit before Alexander's killing machine. The Ashwakaina offered stubborn resistance from their mountain strongholds of Masaga, Bazira and Ora. The bloody fighting at Masaga was a prelude to what awaited Alexander in India. On the first day after bitter fighting, the Macedonians and Greeks were forced to retreat with heavy losses. Alexander himself was seriously wounded in the ankle. On the fourth day, the king of Masaga was killed, but the city refused to surrender. The command of the army went to his old mother, which brought the entire women of the area into the fighting. Realizing that his plans to storm India were going down at its very gates, Alexander called for a truce. The Ashwakaina agreed. The old queen was too trusting. That night, when the citizens of Masaga had gone off to sleep after their celebrations, Alexander's troops entered the city and massacred the entire citizenry. A similar slaughter then followed at Ora. However, the fierce resistance put up by the Indian defenders had reduced the strength and perhaps the confidence of the until then all-conquering Macedonian army. On the way to battle Porus, Alexander's soldiers were psychologically battered. The soldiers saw astounding scenes of holy men hanging upside down from trees and meditating, and it was apparent that they had been doing it for a long time. If they fall asleep, they would die. The guides of the army of Alexander were pupils of a professor from Taxila University by the name of Chanakya, the advisor of Mauryan Empire. Alexander had also heard from his wife Roxana that the Nandas of the Magadha kingdom had 6,000 war elephants and the Emperor Chandragupta Maurya of the Mauryan Empire had 9,000 war elephants. They also had hordes of dogs who could kill leopards and whip up a booming barking frenzy which terrified men and horses. His cavalry horses would be no match for the mighty elephants. In his entire conquering career, Alexander's hardest encounter was the Battle of Hydaspes, in which he faced King Porus of Paurava, a small but prosperous Indian kingdom on the river Jhelum. Porus is described in Greek accounts as standing 7 feet tall. In May 326 BCE, the European and Paurava armies faced each other across the banks of the Jhelum. By all accounts, it was an awe-inspiring spectacle. The 34,000 Macedonian infantry and 7,000 Greek cavalry were bolstered by the Indian king Ambi, who was Porus' rival. Ambi was the ruler of the neighboring kingdom of Taxila and had offered to help Alexander on condition he would be given Porus' kingdom. Porus awaits the attack of Alexander on July 326 BCE. Facing this tumultuous force led by the Alexander was the Paurava army of 20,000 infantry, 2,000 cavalry and 200 war elephants. Being a comparatively small kingdom by Indian standards, Paurava couldn't have maintained such a large standing army, so it's likely many of its defenders were hastily armed civilians. Also, the Greeks habitually exaggerated enemy strength. According to Greek sources, for several days, the armies eyeballed each other across the river. The Greek Macedonian force, after having lost several thousand soldiers fighting the Indian mountain cities, were terrified at the prospect of fighting the fierce Paurava army. They had heard about the havoc Indian war elephants created among enemy ranks. The modern equivalent of battle tanks, the elephants also scared the wits out of the horses in the Greek cavalry. Another terrible weapon in the Indians' armory was the 2-meter bow. As tall as a man, it could launch massive arrows able to transfix more than one enemy soldier. The battle was savagely fought, as the volleys of heavy arrows from the long Indian bows scythed into the enemy's formations. The first wave of war elephants waded into the Macedonian phalanx that was bristling with 17 feet long sarissas. Some of the animals got impaled in the process. Then a second wave of these mighty beasts rushed into the gap created by the first, either trampling the Macedonian soldiers or grabbing them by their trunks and presenting them up for the mounted Indian soldiers to cut or spear them. It was a nightmarish scenario for the invaders. As the terrified Macedonians pushed back, the Indian infantry charged into the gap. In the first charge by the Indians, Porus' brother Amr killed Alexander's favorite horse Bucephalus, forcing Alexander to dismount. This was a big deal. In battles outside India, the elite Macedonian bodyguards had not allowed a single enemy soldier to deliver so much as a scratch on their king's body, let alone slay his mount. Yet in this battle, Indian troops not only broke into Alexander's inner cordon, they also killed Nicaea, one of his leading commanders. According to the Roman historian Marcus Justinus, Porus challenged Alexander, who charged him on horseback. In the ensuing duel, Alexander fell off his horse and was at the mercy of the Indian king's spear. But Porus deterred for a second, and Alexander's bodyguards rushed in to save their king. There was no point in defeating Porus, even if he could, and setting the mighty Nandas and Mauryas after him for sure. The Mauryas had an Ayurveda surgeon turned military strategist, Chanakya, the professor at Taxila, in charge, known for his mental acumen. The courage of the Macedonians evaporated when they came to know the Nandas were awaiting them with 2 lakh infantry, 80,000 cavalry, 8,000 war chariots, and 6,000 fighting elephants. Undoubtedly, Alexander's army would have walked into a slaughterhouse. Hundreds of kilometers from the Indian heartland, Alexander ordered a retreat to great jubilation among his soldiers. Initially, a demoralized Alexander sent the Ambi, the king of Taxila, for truce. Porus got furious on seeing the traitor Indian king and threw a spear at him and drove him away. Porus was poised to deliver the final blow. Alexander now played the ace up his slimy sleeve. He dishonorably sent his wife Roxana to tie a rakhi on Porus to be his sister, an old Indian custom. It now became Porus' responsibility to ensure Alexander was safe, an ironclad guarantee. The Western mind cannot understand these Indian concepts. In return, Porus gave Alexander a few elephants with instructions on how to use them in war, and he also gifted some diamonds. India was the only source of diamonds in the world till the 19th century. Porus gave Alexander a stock of living katarvaza, the West call it aloe vera, an Ayurvedic magic healing herb from Kerala, to fast forward heal his wounds. On its way south towards the sea, Alexander's army was constantly harried by Indian partisans, republics and kingdoms. In a campaign at Sangala in Punjab, the Indian attack was so ferocious it completely destroyed the Greek cavalry, forcing Alexander to attack on foot. In the next battle against the Malavs of Multan, he was felled by an Indian warrior whose arrow pierced the Macedonians' breastplate and ribs. Although there was more fighting, Alexander's wound put an end to any more personal exploits. Lung tissue never fully recovers, and the thick scarring in its place made every breath cut like a knife. Alexander never recovered and died in Babylon, modern Iraq, at the age of 33. Please like, share and subscribe to our channel for latest updates.